Good morning, good afternoon, good evening with everybody around the world coming here to see the Responsive Nonprofit Summit. I have the pleasure of introducing my good friend Noah Barnett. And let's talk a little bit about the workshop that he's going to go through here this morning, this afternoon, this evening. Trust is essential for growth. Unfortunately, in 2022, the Edelman Trust Barometer reported that nonprofits are perceived as less trustworthy than their corporate counterparts. And the GiveUSA just estimated the number of U.S. households that gave to nonprofits decreased from 66% to just under 50%. That's a decline of 16% in just 22 years. This challenge, combined with change as a constant rising competition and costs to reach our supporters and competing priorities for their time, their budgets, drive many nonprofits to opt out of one of those three strategies. They do nothing and hope that mission markets itself. They try everything, which ends up looking like a lot of nothing, or they just run off in ad hoc campaigns, which end up all over the place and rarely offer those productive insights. Each rely on a magic, not marketing. But let's give a warm welcome to Noah Barnett, the VP of Marketing at Feather, to the stage. He's going to share some of the insights that they gleaned from doing a fundraising survey of about 404 nonprofit organizations, from the leaders from fundraising and marketing, and what they matter to you and your organization's growth here in 2023 and beyond. Noah, the stage is yours, my friend.
Eric, it's always a pleasure to reconnect with you and the Virtuous team. This summit is deeply special to me, and so I'm grateful to be back as a partner with Feather and Virtuous to make sure that this Responsive Nonprofit Summit is the best possible. Grateful to be here. And we're going to kick off today's session with a little bit of a spark question. So get your chat keys ready. I would love to know what you would do if you had the Force. What would you do with it to help your organization? There was a Star Wars week, or May the 4th last week, and so I was inspired as I was putting this presentation together to include this. So I'd love to know, what would you do for your organization if you had the Force? It could be anything from attract more donors to your organization. It could be solving the cause area that you're working on, making sure every child has access to quality education, as our keynotes shared this morning. And it looks like some things are coming in. Jedi mind trick people to follow up on their commitments. That's a great one, Daniel. Jenny says, get more people involved with our mission to spread joy. Lindsay's sharing to attract more volunteers. Tara just says straight up mind control, which I totally get that. That would make our jobs much easier. Ruth says triple our private donations. Wendy's sharing that we want to bridge the gap between corporate partners and the nonprofit sector. Also understand needs, going deeper into the galaxy to find more donors. Now, I want you all to remember what you shared, whether you shared it in the chat or what you think you're thinking about as you're listening to this question, because it's going to be important and we're going to come back to it throughout today's session. Tracy says, communicate more effectively to every donor. Exactly. So let's get into this. I want to kick off today's session with a bit of a story. Who knows what's going on here? Just type it into the chat if you know what is going on in this photo. So if you are listening into this only, you see a store, a big box store with a bunch of people waiting outside. It looks like it's dark. Maybe it's early in the evening. Wendy says Black Friday 2012. That's very specific. Were you in this line? An Apple release, Black Friday, a game console release. So yeah, exactly. What is interesting in this photo is you see a bunch of people doing what I saw when I was younger, that they're doing irrational things. They're waiting in line outside in the cold to get their hands on maybe technology early, or if this was a bookstore, to get the latest release of the Harry Potter book. I definitely waited in line for the Harry Potter books. Or it's waiting in line to get tickets now digitally, right? We do these irrational things. Look at what happened with the Taylor Swift tour and how people were waiting and waiting and waiting and ding, 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 and then get disappointed when the tickets are gone and have to do or order them from the secondary market. The thing that's interesting about this photo, and was interesting to me when I was younger observing this, is like, wow, what is this magic that stores are using to convince people to do irrational things, to wait for products outside? And what I learned as I dug into it further and got into marketing classes and others is that it's actually not it's not magic, it's marketing. And so as I continue through my career, and Wendy, one of my old colleagues, is on this call, so you'll probably remember this photo, is how could we actually use this powers, these marketing powers? That's not magic. It's actually just marketing. It's a skill set. It's something that you can learn to actually help and support really important causes. So if we are using marketing to convince people to do irrational things, how could we also use marketing to do very rational things, like provide Francis and his friends access to education, access to housing, clean water, food, and shelter? And as one program officer described to us, how could we give Francis and the other children across our children's programs the opportunity to dream again? Now, that impacts me deeply because we had the opportunity to use this skill, marketing, and apply it to mission, to mobilize more people towards our mission. And that's really driven my entire career, whether it was early on at World Help with Wendy and others, helping children like Francis, or whether it was going to the Adventure Project to provide dignity and jobs, or ending up at Virtuous, where I previously was, where we were helping to enable nonprofits to treat all donors like major donors, to give them that experience so they could connect with it. And now here at Feather, with my colleagues, where we're trying to help organizations move from unreliable magic tactics to really doing good marketing. And I'm going to share a little bit more about that today. And these are lessons we learned from really helping over 1,500 nonprofits. Now, in helping over 1,500 nonprofits and spending, almost 15 years now helping work alongside nonprofits as they mobilize people towards their missions, is that we've realized something that's really important. And that's that most nonprofits actually rely on magic, not marketing. So even though what Best Buy and others were doing was marketing to mobilize people towards these behaviors, and what we did at World Help and other organizations, and maybe your organization, is trying to do marketing, at the end of the day, we actually rely more on magic to mobilize people towards our mission and not marketing. And so I'm going to kind of explain this, because what I think is important to get out of this session is that we cannot rely our mission, the things that you wrote in the chat, whether it was mobilizing more volunteers, growing our donor base, bridging the gap between our corporate partners in the nonprofit sector, tripling private donations, getting adequate funding to build our team. We can't wait for Grogu to come save the day. We can't rely on magic. We have to rely on good marketing. And what I want to do is kind of map out the differences between unreliable marketing or unreliable magic and good marketing, and then provide a framework for you and your teams to do good marketing and kind of lean into those things that you said if you had the force you would do. And what I'm saying is you don't need the force to accomplish them. You just need to do good marketing. So let's dig into this a little bit further. One thing that's true, and this was true in the survey we did with over 400 nonprofit leaders this past winter, is that the number one trend limiting growth for nonprofits was that we're operating on fumes. If you're operating on fumes, just put a +1 in the chat. It was something my good friends John and Becky just talked about a lot on their panel discussion, which is that we are tired as a sector. We feel tired, we feel burnout. We also feel like we're just constantly fighting against limited resources. And ultimately, this is what causes us to just maybe opt for unreliable magic, or hoping that we have the force one day, because we're dealing with everything across an array of challenges. And I call this the chaos cloud that we have to operate in, where we as nonprofit leaders are spent because we have constant change. There's lack of time and we're understaffed. There's too many channels to keep up with. We want to acquire more donors, but we also want to retain our donors. We're not even sure what's really working. There's competing priorities, there's supporter fatigue, there's low awareness, limited budget. I'm sure many of these resonate with you. And it's the reality that we're operating in. And that reality kind of is summed up in what I call the 4 primary challenges that we're trying to navigate. And number 1 is that we're trying to navigate through change, because change is now constant and it's difficult to keep up. We're trying to navigate through competition for attention. And the competition continues to grow and the cost continue to go up for us to reach our impact. And we're not just competing with other nonprofits or charitable causes or organizations doing the work we're doing. We're actually competing against Netflix and the 24/7 newsfeed. The third challenge we're dealing with is confusion in reporting and what actually really works. And this is kind of saying, hey, even the things we are doing, we're not sure which are working and which are not. There's this adage that 50% of your marketing is working. You just don't know which half. And last but not least, we're competing for priorities. We're understaffed, we're under-resourced. And sometimes this is true limits. We have limits in the funding that we have. We have the limits in kind of the things that we can do because we have a small set of resources. Other times, this is actually a priority issue. And I see this actually more common in nonprofits than the latter, it being a true limit, where it's not that we don't have resources, but it's we as an organization. And I know you are probably not included in the we, but we don't provide enough resources for fundraising and marketing. We don't provide enough headcount for fundraising and marketing. We allocate more to other areas, and we see fundraising and marketing as overhead. And it's not. And we kind of have to push against that, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But these challenges that we deal with as a sector cause us to do what I like to refer to as typical marketing. We either do nothing because we don't have the resources, we don't have the time, we don't have the bandwidth. We're just like, hey, our mission is going to market itself. And that's what we're going to do. The alternative is that we do everything. We say, hey, I'm not sure what's working or what we should do. And so we're just going to do everything. TikTok, telethons, billboards, Backstreet Boy covers. I'm not sure. You're doing lots of things and everything, and you're focusing much more on the ings of marketing and not the market. The third strategy that nonprofits adopt in light of this chaos cloud we're dealing with is what I typically refer to as the board member strategy. And that's we're just doing random things. We're doing this over here, this Facebook ads campaign. We have the golf tournament. We're doing a direct mail piece. We're sending some emails. Let's try, I don't know, LinkedIn's really interesting right now. Let's try some LinkedIn. And so in the same way where sometimes you go into a board meeting, you walk out and you have more to-dos than less, we actually do that to ourselves. And we use this ad hoc strategy. We're just going to try a bunch of things and see what happens. And what I would like to make the case for is that that's not really marketing. That's just unreliable magic. But there's this alternative approach. And this is the framework I'm going to lay out as we walk through the rest of the presentation, which moves us from this typical marketing or unreliable magic to what we like to call good marketing here at Feather. And that's a approach that's community first, not channel first. So instead of saying, what are we going to do on email? What are we going to do on Facebook? What are we going to do in direct mail? What are we going to do in major gift one-on-one? We say first, who is the audience we're trying to understand? Who is the audience we're trying to understand? What do we know about them? What do we understand about them? And how then should we cultivate connections with them? The second attribute of good marketing is it's responsive. And today you're here at the Responsive Nonprofit Summit, where we lean into these principles of learning and not linear models. We lean into these principles that we are working in an environment where we want to have a conversation with our community, that we are reaching out and connecting, but we expect to get information back, and that's going to change how we respond next. The third thing is good marketing is it's omni-channel. And so instead of thinking about a monotone strategy of, hey, we're going to send emails to this audience, or we're going to do direct mail to this audience, or we're going to do digital ads to this audience, we're actually blending that together and providing a surround sound experience. And last but not least, and one of the most important things, is it's measurable. So when someone says, is our marketing working? The answer isn't, well, we got this many clicks or this many views. It's actually, hey, our efforts in our marketing actually resulted in $30,000 in donations, or 972 people signing up to be a part of our cause, or we sold 272 tickets because of the marketing that we did. We're tying it to impact, not clicks. And so how do we do this? Again, the argument I'm going to lay out is that in response to the cloud of chaos, we can't change those attributes. But rather than opting for typical marketing, which is unreliable magic, we can do good marketing and actually get better results, more impactful results, and feel more confidence in our approach by adopting a different view. So let's get into this a little bit further as we talk through how do we move from this unreliable magic to good marketing. And I'm going to provide a framework on how you can grow your fundraising and your community. So to do that, I'm going to really lay out a plan. And if you've ever seen me present, you've seen this slide before because I love it. It's a perfect slide when we are moving from insights or kind of discussion to now we're going to make a plan. Because the most important thing to do in the midst of the chaos cloud, in the midst of the things that you can't control outside of the work that you do, is you still have to make a plan. And that's what Eli's doing here. He's making a plan. He's writing something down. He's being very intent. But the other key attribute is he's doing it in pencil. And I think that's what we have to do as well. We have to make a plan, but we have to be nimble enough and we have to be able to evolve it. So I like to say we need to make a plan, we need to do it in pencil, and we need to make sure we bring a bright pink eraser along the journey with us. And that's what this framework does as well. So let's get into the framework. I'm going to show the whole framework to you, but then I'm going to walk through it one by one. My transition slides didn't work when we converted it to PDF. So I want to acknowledge that fact that there's a lot going on this slide, but we're going to break it down piece by piece as we go. So the first part of the marketing framework that we've developed here at Feather and that we advise our clients on and that we advocate for nonprofits to adopt starts with identifying your communities. Now, your community of those that support your cause or should support your cause is much broader than just the people you know, but it does start there first. So you have to look into your CRM like Virtuous and say, well, who are our donors? Who are our current volunteers? Who are the people that we know? Who are on our email list? Who are already engaging with us? We also then want to look at people like website visits or prospect lists, maybe social or broader communities, event attendees, members, volunteers, beneficiaries, and patrons. These are all people that we know and that we're trying to engage in. But there's also a set of unknown people that you should know. And we like to call it that there's people you know in your community and there's people you should know. And so those might be people that are looking for ways to get involved with your cause. It could be individuals that have visited your website, but they're anonymous to you because you didn't see them. They could be individuals that saw your ads or clicked on your digital ads, but you never got to convert them back on a form or on a donation page. It could be individuals that are searching for ways searching for things to get involved with, but they don't know about your cause and you want to connect with them in that way. And so you have your known audiences that are in your community and you have the audiences you should know. And the first part of the framework is that we want to understand pieces of that or segments of that audience. So as we segment our audiences, we want to really understand. And we're going to dig into that understand part of the framework further as we go through this. And we're trying to understand the context and the intent of those pieces of our communities or of those audiences or segments. And when I use the word context and intent, I'm using them intentionally because when I say context, the question I like to encourage nonprofits to ask is, how would this audience or this segment or this group of donors that or donors or prospective donors, how would they describe their relationship with you? Now, I'm going to say it one more time because I think it's important. How would they, the audience, describe their relationship with you? And this is different than how would we, the nonprofit or you, describe your relationship with them. That would occasionally lead to us saying they're an active donor, or they're on our LIBUNT list, or they used to volunteer, or they gave last year, but they haven't given this year, or they've attended an event, but they've never donated to our cause. Those are ways we would describe our relationship with them. But how would they describe their relationship with you? That's what context. And so this could be, hey, I supported this cause last year because I was really engaged with their event and I wanted to get more involved. So that's the context that the audience might have with you that differs from how we would describe that. The second part of understanding in the framework, and it always starts with understanding first, is the intent. So what did they intend to do? So maybe they came to your website and they were reviewing your advocacy programs. That's showing some sort of intent to understand or to dig into your advocacy programs. Maybe they came to your event page and tried to buy a ticket, but they didn't finish. There was intent there to buy a ticket. They came to look at that, but they didn't complete it. So it could be around interest or things that they're interested in, like your advocacy programs, or maybe it's your child development programs or your environmental safety training programs, whatever it is. Or it could be related to timing. So they came to my website yesterday to try to finish or to register or buy a ticket or to make a donation or to volunteer, and they did not complete that. So it could be based on interest or timing. That's where intent comes in. And when we take the context and the intent that we have and understand those with our communities, we now can then think about how are we going to cultivate connections with that audience. So this is the second part of the framework, is how are we going to cultivate connections with that part of our community? And cultivation can be thought of as a campaign. So what is the campaign we are going to run to connect this audience or part of our community to us and our connections? And there's two parts of a campaign that you should consider. And we're going to dive into this even further as we go through, is that a campaign has both content. So this could be your messaging. This could be the stories you're telling. This could be the words you're using or the positioning that you're using. It also has channels, which is what are the ways that we are going to connect with this audience or reach this audience and bring them back and try to activate them towards some sort of impact. And so you have a campaign, and then within that campaign, you have channels and you have content. Now, it's very important that we see channels and content as equals in this cultivation plan, because when we're thinking about building our campaigns, we shouldn't choose channels and then content, because that makes us detach our messaging so that we're having different conversations with different people or with through different channels, instead of seeing it as, hey, there's a type of content or message, or hey, let's say we're raising money for providing children breakfast in our communities, and the message around that is that there's 47% of the population doesn't eat breakfast because they don't have access to a healthy or eat a healthy breakfast, and we are going to provide that to them. That's the content or messaging we're trying to communicate with this specific audience that we've chosen. And then we are going to determine the channels that we are going to use to best connect with them. So channels and content are really important, and they are seen as complementary, not dependent on each other. The third step of the process is once we drive a connection. So the reason we use the word connection here is because if you don't connect with your community, if you don't reach people where they are and build that connection, you actually can't activate them to do something else. If we don't connect with them first, we can't activate them to take some sort of action or to drive impact as part of our work. So the first step is understand. Second is cultivate through campaigns, channels, and content. Once we've driven connections, how are we going to activate them? Maybe that's driving memberships, maybe that's driving donations or tickets or signups. And then ultimately, as we're going through this process, number 4 on this is to learn. We're adopting a responsive mindset. I know that's a big part of today's conversation, is how do we think about our organization's mission, how we operate, how we think about fundraising and marketing through this responsive lens. And in the same way, the marketing framework has that responsive vantage by learning. What did we learn about this community that we connected with? What new intent or context do we have that we can incorporate into future campaigns? There might have been a portion of people that didn't activate towards the impact you were going to have. Well, how are we going to cultivate them differently next time? There are people that did take action. How are we going to cultivate connections with them differently next time? Now, again, this is very heady because I couldn't do my transitions on this, but we're going to break this framework down over the next 15 or 20 minutes. And I would open it up to any questions or comments you have in the chat as we go through. So let's get started. Oh, last reminder before we break down the framework even further is there's a difference between the good marketing framework and the engagement funnel. So, for example, there are people that are aware and connected and loyal to your organization, and you're trying to continue to cultivate those relationships. There might be people that are engaged, maybe at a minor level. They might be first-time donors. They might have volunteered once. They attended the event, and you're trying to engage them deeper into your organization. And then there's also a group of your community that you're trying to drive awareness for. And we can use the good marketing framework across all of these engagement funnels as we're thinking about connecting with that portion of our audience. So of these loyal donors, what do we understand about them? How are we going to cultivate them? What channels and content are we going to use? What are we trying to activate them to do? And that process would lead to a different outcome than what we would do for people that know nothing about our organization, but have expressed interest in our cause area, because they don't know us. So that's their context. They have a relationship with the cause, but they wouldn't have a relationship with us. And so we would then cultivate them differently and likely activate them to do something different. So again, these are complementary frameworks. So you have the good marketing framework and then you have the engagement funnel. And you can apply the framework across each of these phases of the engagement funnel. And we're going to reference examples that move through the awareness, engagement, conversion stages as we go through today's conversation. So again, talked about this briefly, but I'll dive into this again. First stage of the process is you want to identify who that you are trying to engage within your community. Is this someone that is in the awareness stage that doesn't know anything about you, but you're trying to connect with them? Are these longtime loyal supporters? What do we know about them? And then what's the context of their relationship? And then what's their intent? And that's going to enable us to create segments that we can then cultivate. So example segments that you might you create would be active supporters. You could think about members, website visitors, both known website visitors and unknown website visitors. You might think about volunteers, lapsed supporters, participants. Some of this is recap, but it's just a reminder. These are the types of segments that you would be creating. And then once you've identified them, that's when then you would map out, okay, well, what's the context and the intent of this segment with us? What do I understand about this part of my community? And then how is that going to inform how I think about cultivation? And this is a good reminder here, is that what you know about your community drives your campaigns. We often get this in reverse, is that we run campaigns and then try to understand our audience and how we can drive them to do what we want them to do. But we have to start with what we know about our community to then drive campaigns. Because even though if you have a goal to raise $100,000 to provide children a high quality breakfast, that is your objective as an organization. Now, how you get to that is by starting to identify and understand audiences within your community that then you can activate to be a part of that. But the cultivation, the campaigns you're running would differ from your loyal supporters versus prospective supporters, for example. And so what you know about your community should and does drive your campaigns. The other focus here, which is very different, and I think it's hard for us to adopt, is we are focusing on relevancy over reach. So reach is great. We love saying, hey, we reached 10,000 people with this campaign across all of our channels. The challenge with that is if you just reach people, you're not driving connections. And relevancy drives connections. So the reason that we're starting with our audience and then understanding of our community first, and then creating our campaigns, is because we want to have a highly relevant campaigns, because high relevant campaigns drive results. Reach doesn't necessarily drive results. So we're going to optimize for relevancy over reach. So this first part is identify your community and then understand that. The second is the cultivate, which is where we'll spend the bulk of our time. Again, cultivation is about crafting the content and the channels you want to do to drive connections with that portion of your community. And so you're depending on where they are at in the engagement funnel, you would then use different content and potentially different channels on how to connect with them. For example, if I'm a new donor that doesn't, or I don't know anything about your organization, but I care about children's education in Phoenix, Arizona, I might be searching for things that are related to that, like children's camps that are STEM approved in Phoenix, Arizona. And not that you provide children's camps, but you know that if I'm someone searching for children's camps and I'm trying to put my child into a camp, that might be an audience that would have an affinity for your cause to provide children high quality breakfasts so they can have access to high quality education. So that might be in the awareness stage. But how you talk to me or the channels you might use would be search intent or digital advertising or even geofencing versus what you may use in a loyalty campaign, which is someone that's been supporting your cause for a long, long time. You can use different tactics like email, maybe personal outreach from your major gifts officers or your programs team. You might use direct mail because that's the established communication. The message might still be the same. Hey, we are trying to invite you to be a part of this campaign. The channels and the content tone, or the tone at which we invite people to be part of something they already are part of, versus the content and messaging you might use to invite someone to be a part of something that they haven't yet been a part of, is very different. And so that's why we start with the audience first. And then the most important thing is that we want to run omni-channel campaigns to reach people at every stage of engagement and simplify reporting all in one place. So you're thinking about email, display ads, social ads, website engagement, marketing automation. When we're thinking about this, these are all channels that we could use to connect with that portion of the audience. So there's, I'm going to share a few different channels or types of channels that you could use to connect with your audiences. And we're going to tie them back to the engagement stages of the funnel so that you know where they fall. So the first one I'm going to highlight is something we see a lot of our nonprofit customers at Feather use to reach new audiences or to acquire new donors, but also something that's very common for nonprofits to use to reach new audiences. If you're familiar with like prospecting lists, if you've been around fundraising for a while and you've used list swaps or list co-ops or identified a prospective list that you wanted to reach out to via direct mail, affinity targeting or affinity campaigns are a very similar type channel that you can use, but in a digital environment. So you can identify, I would like to target women business owners in Colorado that have a income over $200,000 a year, and that are frequent shoppers or have shown shopping intent at outdoor retailers like Patagonia and REI. And the reason we're targeting that is because those behaviors align with the behaviors of our current supporters. And so we're going to target those behaviors to reach net new supporters. And that's what affinity targeting allows you to do. It also allows you to exclude people that aren't a great fit. So if you know there are certain, for example, political leanings that don't support your cause, or specific areas of the country that don't necessarily lean into your cause because it's not relevant for them. Maybe it's only education in the Southwest. And so you wouldn't want individuals from the Northeast, for example. You can layer in different affinity targetings as a channel to basically use the things you know about your current supporters to basically find your next best supporters. And that's how affinity and awareness targeting works. And so it's a great channel if you're trying to connect with people you should know and not just people you shouldn't or that you currently know. Another engagement type is retargeting. So people that come to your website, and for a lot of us, this might be pretty basic and something we've been doing for ages. For others, this might be net new. And so retargeting is a type of connection, so a channel of communication that you can use that's tied to digital ads, where people come to your website. And when they come to your website, you want to engage them when they leave because they didn't take the action or didn't activate on what you expected them to do. And so retargeting can be a great way to re-engage people that came into your quote unquote store. They looked around and then you can reconnect with them using messaging that aligns with their intent. So if they visit the children's advocacy pages, how do I reconnect with them through that type of channel and with that type of content? You can also do this for people that actually take action. So let's say someone came and made a donation to you and your organization during your year-end campaign. Well, you know that that intent has resulted in them taking a donation, but you still want to connect with them. Retargeting is a great way to keep the story and keep the messaging in front of them so that they can actually be a part of sharing the campaign further. So the action isn't donate, but it might be, hey, share the video or connect. So again, it's using a specific channel aligned to the audience, but how you use retargeting as a channel would be dependent on the community you're trying to target because your creative, your content, your messaging, and what you're trying to activate to would completely differ. The other thing we want to remind you of here is that you want to focus on community first, not channel-based reporting. And so using the good marketing framework, we always encourage organizations to say, hey, we're trying to target this audience. We're going to choose a few different channels to connect. We want to have that omni-channel approach. And then we are going to choose the content and the messaging we want to distribute or drive connections with to that audience. And what's important is looking at as of this audience we're trying to engage, how well did we actually engage them? It's not that Facebook did this or email did this or direct mail did this. It's rather we provide the surround sound experience. How did that actually impact the community towards the action we were trying to mobilize them towards or activate them towards? So again, as we go through this, the awareness stage, the engagement stage, the cultivation, you can apply this framework, the good marketing framework, across each of these stages to identify the right content and the right channels to build connections. Again, you're trying to cultivate connections with your community. The third stage here is to activate. So once we've driven connections through the channels that we have, what are we trying to drive them towards? And the question I always get asked, and I'm going to share this in the initial slide that is coming up, is that activation isn't a predictable game. I don't know exactly what to ask for or to activate towards, and I don't know what someone might respond to versus not respond to. And one of my old colleagues reached out to me via text and said, "Hey, we're talking about you today because I feel like you might know the answer to my question. We have a segment of 3,000 people who have given recently. So they're trying to understand their community first, and they've given less than $500. We're thinking of sending a direct mail ask for joining our monthly giving program. So they're thinking about they want to activate towards a direct or a monthly giving program. They want to use direct mail. They're also going to use email. So they're using direct mail and email to reach and connect with this. And they're going to have stories that tie back to the monthly giving program. Now, their question was, should we just ask for a one-time gift instead because it's end of year and people typically prefer one time at year end? Now, the question I sent back was, it really depends. I don't know. And so what I encouraged her to do, which is part of the text you can't see, is to dig further into what they know about that community of 3,000 and also what they know about people that have given one time versus giving monthly. Because going back to understanding the behaviors of the community is going to help you better inform, but you still don't know. And so it's all about making sure that you're testing and experimenting with this. So we encourage organizations as they're thinking about activation to use the one of these three types of tests. And I actually borrowed this from my good friend Brady Josephson, who now is the head of marketing and growth at Charity Water. And his guidance was that all tests are not created equal. And sometimes how we think about testing things or the answer to it depends falls into the purple bucket or the experiment bucket. So we're doing variable testing that includes a holdout group or a control group. So we might think of this like A/B testing, or hey, we're going to slightly turn the stamp versus having the stamp, be a virtual or a digital stamp, for example. And the challenge is that when we think about testing or experimenting through that only lens of experiments, is that we have to have some sort of success or hypothesis first before we can do experiments. So when we hit a depends that we've never tried or that we don't really have any data on, we might just opt out from doing that because we don't have anything to experiment with. And his encouragement was there's two types of tests before you get to experiments that might unlock more opportunities to run tests and to learn. And the first of that is to actually just try things. Like it's okay just to say, hey, we're going to try Facebook ads out, or we are going to try mobile messaging, or we are going to try this video content of our program leader, and we're going to test out this new messaging content. We are just trying new things to try to learn and benchmark our results. And so as you and your team are thinking about, okay, well, how do we use the good marketing framework in our own organization? It just might result in you saying, hey, we're going to try this type of channel, or we're going to try this type of content as we reach and engage this part of our community. Now, the second side of the tests that you can run is what are called pilots. So these are after you've kind of gotten some information, you've tried some things out. Pilot are organized tests of new things with a clear hypothesis on the expected results within a predetermined time frame. So an example of a pilot might be, we have never done retargeting fully, but we've tested it a little bit, and we really think it works well for audiences that come to our website that we don't know, and then they leave the website. And we've tried it out a few times, but we've never really run a full test. So we're going to scope out a 2-month test where we are going to target people that come to our website that we don't know who they are. So that's the audience. We know they're on our website. We know they engage for some reason. We kind of understand the intent because they were just on our website and they left. So there's some timing elements here. And we're going to run a 2-month or an 8-week test or pilot where we're going to run retargeting ads. And we are also going to update some copy and messaging that we're going to do to specifically engage this population that came to us and then left. That would be a pilot. So you're not experimenting with anything because you haven't done this fully before. So you're not comparing old results with new results, but you're running a pilot so that you're running through the thing and it says, hey, we have a hypothesis that we're going to be able to reconvert or to drive 20% more donations from this population that we weren't previously engaging. and we're going to see what the results are. Pilot's over, and we realized it was actually 22%. So we weren't exactly right, but now we've understood that this is working and it's something that we want to continue to do. That's a great example of a pilot. So ultimately, the key in the activation stage, as you think about what are we trying to activate this community to do after we drive connection with them, is to almost assume you're wrong, but your goal is to find out how wrong as quickly as possible. And we can't do that if we don't test things, whether that's trying things, piloting things, or experimenting with things. So that's the key ingredient as you think about this activation stage in the framework. Now, we're coming up on the final bit of time together, and I want to encourage you to drop more questions into the chat if you have them. But my colleague and partner in marketing at Feather shared a link to a roundtable discussion we're going to have after today's session. So if you want to follow up on this, you want to dig in, you want to have more FaceTime with me and our team, you're welcome to do that by clicking on that link at the end of the presentation. But if you have questions now, feel free to drop those in the chat. But I did say there was a fourth stage, and the fourth stage is enabling us to be responsive, which is to learn. And an important part of learning is to isolate what we're learning into buckets of information. So what are we learning about blank? Because learning's generally like, did this or did this not work, is not learning because it didn't answer a question outside of like yes or no, worked or didn't work. And so what I like to encourage organizations to do as they're working through this for the first time is after a campaign's complete. So after you've run through, you understand the audience, you've cultivated connections, you've activated towards conversions, is to go back and ask questions that are fit into these three buckets. So the first bucket is the one that's most commonly analyzed or kind of asked, which is the programs we ran. So the campaign we ran, what was the reach? What were the results? What was the revenue that we generated? What was working? Why? What's not? Why? What was the impact to time to value? There's a bunch of questions you can ask. Oh, that channel didn't work. This channel did. That message really resonated. This message really didn't. Oh, that's interesting. Hey, we only really drove 20% of our community to activate, but that 20% actually had this unique attribute about them. And the other 80% didn't. And so that's something we can learn. Again, that's falling all into the left side bucket, which is the programs bucket. We typically stop our learning in the programs bucket because it's easy for us to sit around with our colleagues or even our leadership, our board, and say, here's what worked, and externalize it and say, hey, Facebook didn't work. That copy in the email, the one with the story from the founder, did work. The video that we did, that we invested a lot of effort in, that worked really well. Man, we crushed it on social media. Our direct mail piece performed okay. That's easy to do. The hard thing is to ask questions around the second two buckets, which is people and processes. So the people question is, did we have the right collaboration and people working on the tasks? Because occasionally what you realize is that our Facebook campaigns didn't work or our email campaigns didn't work because we actually had a lack of time, and John's time was spread thin because they were also helping with an event. And so they actually weren't the best fit for email, the campaign, and they actually fell through. Or there was competition and competing priorities across the team because Jane was trying to make sure that we still hit the gala registration goals. And John was always fighting with Jane about getting budget for prioritization. And so there was people conflicts in here because we didn't have the right aligned incentives. Identifying that conflict in the people or the lack of capabilities or the lack of engagement, that's really hard to do. But I think it's helpful to have a process to say, hey, as part of a retrospect on this campaign, we are going to analyze the program results. We're also going to analyze the people, like what went well, what didn't go well, where was there misunderstandings in communication. And then the third bucket is around processes, because sometimes campaigns don't work or things don't end up in the right way because we just didn't have the right processes in place. There were bottlenecks. There was like someone was waiting on someone, which made us miss the deadline on something. And so there were just like process hiccups. It's not really people conflicts or lack of abilities or capabilities. Everyone had the right intentions and the right focus. Our programs actually were set up properly. We did that, but our processes were really where the areas were. Maybe we actually didn't have the right tools and we were trying to do too much, and our processes really broke down between our Facebook campaigns over here and our CRM data. And because we didn't have the connections there, we didn't know what was actually working. My only hope for you is looking at this and saying, hey, as we learn, as we try to grow as an organization through these processes, we analyze the programs that we ran, we analyze the people part of it, and then the processes. And what did we learn in each of these categories? And you can do this really quickly in a meeting and say, hey, we're going to sit down for 30 minutes and analyze the results of the campaign. We're going to talk about conflicts between people or lack of abilities or focus. And we're going to analyze the process we use to manage the campaign. Okay, great. These learnings now enable us to do better next time. That's being responsive. That's having an evolving and a nimble mindset to continue to grow as you dig in and try to do good marketing. So there's a few rhythms in here. If you want the resources, I'm sure you'll have access to the slides after today's presentation. But these are just some responsive rhythms that you can really lean into, both on a weekly basis, on a monthly basis, and on a quarterly basis. And this is something even here at Feather in our marketing team, we try to implement this. So we're talking about metrics on Mondays. We're talking about priorities. We're doing weekly wraps to really close the container on the week. Monthly, we're doing retrospects and priority check-ins. And quarterly, we're doing people, processes, and programs review. We're trying to get audience feedback, which honestly is something we fall down on. We forget to ask the people we're engaging for their feedback. And then we have a POT refactor, which stands for priorities, omissions, and targets. So we say, what are we actually going to prioritize? What are we choosing not to prioritize? And why are we doing that? What is the end we're trying to go? So these are helpful. You don't have to adopt all of them, but I think they're helpful as you move from operating this unreliable magic to doing good marketing. These are super helpful for you. So that's it. This is the nonprofit marketing framework, where you're trying to understand your community. You're trying to cultivate connections. You're trying to activate from those connections to drive impact. And then you're trying to learn along the way. And this is something we help organizations do here at Feather. I'm going to keep the conversation going after today's session. So feel free to come and visit us in the booth that Rachel shared. And it looks like Eric's coming back up. So, hey, Eric.
Hey, Noah. Whoop, let me turn it back on. Whoop, camera turned back on. There you go. Hey, Noah, that was fantastic. Thank you so much for taking us from magic to marketing to actually responsive and doing everything in between to help these nonprofits grow generosity. Thank you for all you're doing. Love
Absolutely.
the partnership with Feather, and love what you're doing and for our industry.
Thanks, Eric.
Hey, team. I want to actually,
Eric, if you don't mind, one thing I did want to say is at the beginning of this call, everyone said what they would do with the force. And what I would encourage you to do is to revisit that and say, how could we rely less on magic and rely more on good marketing or good process to actually unlock that ability? Because I believe that's actually the true magic, is adopting a framework that operates inside the cloud of chaos, not just hoping for the best. Our missions deserve more. And I know Virtuous believes that, Feather believes that, and we hope this is helpful. So,
and like I said, this is the way. Thank you, Noah. This is fantastic. Hey, team, wanted to give you about 6-minute break to our next session. I'm actually here in the room with someone who I'd recommend going to see. We've got Stephen Boudreau. Stephen is going to be doing a session all about online giving and like pulling up your webpage and being able to nitpick it and evaluate it for our nonprofits to make it a little easier and frictionless to be able to grow generosity. But before I close out this session, I'm getting a lot of messages from folks that are wanting to hear or see what's going on behind the scenes. So I'm going to take one quick walkthrough so you guys are able to see a little bit of the behind the scenes before I close out. And let's go just take a quick little tour. We've got our CEO over here working away. We've got another booth over here on the tech stage. We've got our whole marketing team going out there, everything else that's going on. As I walk through, we've got Dave Rayleigh over here eating breakfast. We've got our We Are For Good team out here doing the conversation stage. Wave over here, guys. We're closing out. Be sure to check we got Noah over here. So be sure to come to the next session. We've got an hour and a half left. Fantastic stuff. Thank you so much, everybody. See you soon.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Eric. See y'all.